So, about 5 weeks ago, there was a one-day conference in London called the Now and England Conference, and this was set up by the Roger Scruton Legacy Foundation. Now, I wasn't able to attend that. I was here at work. However, I have seen a lot of videos from people that did go, and one of the things that was of the greatest contention you could see from the panelists, the older panelists in the audience, and the younger crowd who were chomping at the bit to really talk about the demographic question, is the fact that the boomer generation and all these people that are supposed to be the authorities guiding the younger to a better future just aren't in sync with one another. Right? There's a total misalignment of what the future of England should be when we get this, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But of course, I just want to bring you all to the attention that the fourth issue of Islander is now out. I've written in it myself, fourth article on the Lord of the Rings, so my bread and butter, but there's many other wonderful articles in there as well, from Carl, the editor Rory, Ed Dutton, Morgoth, the great Morgoth, and many, many other wonderful writers. So if you'd like it, it's on our website, £15, 2 pints in London, and there's also a wonderful merch store as well for other things associated with Islander issue 4. So,
just out of interest, before we move on from that, because I genuinely haven't read it, what's your article about on Lord of the Rings?
This time I've covered Sauron.
Okay.
So I've talked about the Dark Lord Sauron.
Okay.
So there's the first time that I've been able to talk about a baddie in it all. I've done 3 heroes before. So it's been quite a difficult one because he's 50,000 years old. And so I've had to write over quite a large period of fictitious history. But that's just the sort of thing I enjoy doing. So, why am I talking about a conference that happened 5 weeks ago? Well, the reason why I'm talking about it now is because Robert Toombs, who was one of the panelists on the final event of the day, he was one of the ones that was in hot water for having a very unsatisfactory answer to what an Englishman is, right? Because he decided that actually it didn't really have anything to do with ancestry. Are we convinced by this opening gambit?
I think that's pretty ridiculous. I think generally the whole idea that, English has nothing to do with ancestry and isn't... There's nothing to the people, the ethnos, about it seems insane because, one thing's first, if ethnic identity exists for everybody else, but English is not an ethnic identity, then what am I? It's I've got to be something, right? And if other people can also be this, then there's got to be something different that I am. What am I? Am I a Mercian? Yeah, am I a Celt? Am I just a straight up Anglo? There is something that I have to be, and if English is not it, then it's got to be something else.
Right.
Now, of course, there's an ethnic element to a national identity. Of course, there is. That's it. Of course, there is.
Yes. He's always undebatable in the point of it. But these people love to debate and put their words in the Telegraph or wherever else, and they'll write 1,000, 2,000 words on how this is not the case. But if you look into it, well, it's all just waffle. There's no actual real decent arguments towards it. They just kind of poo-poo away anybody who says that there is an ethnic element to it.
Well, they just have to say it because it's the bedrock of the sort of the globalist view. They have to say it, even if it's palpably absurd.
Well, let's start cutting through the waffle, shall we? And we'll take it from there. So it says, you can't teach someone to be English, called a heckler at the end of the conference last month on how to save England. Well, of course you can, I replied. That's how we all learn it. Rubbish, he called, and on it goes. And he's saying that this brief debate was unfortunately stopped by having to go to the pub, but the debate wasn't really stopped there, was it? Because we're still having it now. And the fact is that he's had 5 weeks to come up with a watertight case for why he is right and the younger generation is wrong. And as we can see, there just isn't really anything there. He says, I should explain that my intellectual sin had been to praise Catherine Birbalsingh and to have commented that to see young girls in headscarves, by headscarves he obviously means hijabs, right? Reciting Kipling and singing the national anthem showed that becoming English was possible on the condition that it was encouraged, taught, and indeed required. And then we're starting to get into a question now of, but this is not the same thing, right? All of a sudden you realize how quickly this isn't about whether you're English or not. This is about whether you're monocultural, right? This is about monoculturalism. That's not the same thing as an identity grounded in heritage, in birthright, right? There are many academics, I'm sure, from abroad who very much enjoy a Kipling poem, right? Might have even wrote, scholarly treatises on it, but it doesn't make them English.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
You can be born and bred in India to Indian, ethnically, racially Indian people.
Yes.
And still enjoy a Kipling poem.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Well,
and hold up a Union Jack and wear brogues. It doesn't make you English. It just doesn't.
I mean, wasn't Kipling or someone else born in India?
Yeah.
He was.
English parents. So does that make him Indian as well?
Of course not. That's the classic thing. If my parents, say, were British expats and living in Japan in 1981, and I was born in Japan in a Japanese hospital, even raised in Japan throughout my formative years, it doesn't make me Japanese.
No.
It makes me the son of European expats that happen to be in Japan. But these people, again, it will be very deliberate that he's choosing to muddy the waters and immediately give up on the actual ethnic side of it and just talk about culture. Of course, that's all a deliberate gambit because there is no argument.
But also, what's more, it implies that, the prerequisite for becoming English, for learning to be English, is simply to have a knowledge of English traditions, of English culture, of the English language, right? It's kind of based on intelligence of the culture itself. And by implication, someone with two English parents, born English, born somewhere in the country, who is entirely ignorant of these things, who doesn't know Kipling, has never read a Kipling poem, is not English, right? Because they don't meet the criteria set down by the Indian headmistress in a London school full of people who are third generation from the Commonwealth.
Exactly, and that really is the argument that makes all of this break down, because if someone is English in that way, has a heritage of 1,000, 2,000 years on this island, just because they don't know about their culture, does that mean that they stop becoming English? Again, look at Americans, for example. Again, Anglo-Americans, German-Americans, Dutch-Americans, whatever mix they may be, whatever background they've come from. Again, does that make them less American if they just don't know about anything that's happened? If they don't know, when the Declaration of Independence was signed, does that make them less American? I certainly don't think so. And I think, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a policy of people who are here who aren't English, but, could be British and live in this country. There's nothing wrong with saying, actually, yes, we want you to become part of our culture. We want you to know of the history and everything that's gone on these islands for the past however many centuries, because you will fit in better here. But just because that's a good policy to have and respect people who are still being here, that doesn't still mean that they become English.
It's asking you to believe something that's just a lie. Like someone that's born a man can put on a dress and a bit of lippy and they are a woman now. It's like, just don't try and lie to me like that. Don't make me repeat your lies, because that's what they are, and I'm not having it. It's just nonsense, isn't it? It's nonsense that there's no such thing as sort of an ethnically English person.
These people often like to come out with the idea of, English, well, what's that? That's just a mix of the Anglos, of the Celts, of the Jutes, of the Saxons. English doesn't exist. It's just a mix of all these things. But if they say the same thing about any other identity. They say that, if you then start saying, okay, identify as an Anglo, Oh, well, actually, the Anglos are made up of different northwestern German tribes. There's all the, and then you go down, okay, I identify as one of those tribes. That's my ethnic identity. Oh, well, actually, that's made up of different people who lived in this town and village. They're all, they're all not related to each other. And, like, just because something has a fuzzy border to it does not make it any less real. You
Doesn't
kind of
make
have
the border any less real.
Exactly. Well, for example, the greatest example of this is literally colours. Red, blue, green, purple, yellow. Red exists, blue exists. These things exist. But if you go on the colour spectrum, there's points where red fades into blue, blue fades into green, and the actual overlap of these things. Like, oh, maybe that's a blue green, maybe that's more of a turquoise. Oh, I can't exactly tell what that specific bit on the border case is, but you know exactly what the actual colours, the platonic ideal of those colours are.
Well, another thing as well, Bo, is just that obviously you see it more clearly because you've actually got a bit of vitality, right? A bit of fight, a bit of moxie in you. Whereas you can see, and the reason I bring that up is because when you look at the way that this paragraph here is framed, it's like, but the question of integration and eventual assimilation is no less urgent. There are now, and in the future will be, many children in England who were born elsewhere, or who are descended from a foreign-born parent. Many will have darker skin than mine. We have a very clear choice. Either we do everything possible to make them and their eventual descendants part of our nation, or we treat them as perpetual outsiders, ethnic minorities in a tribalized England. And this is what I mean. He has already determined that the future is more of this. There will be no reverse.
Yeah.
There will be no pushback. There will be no reverse of mass immigration. That in Toombs's mind, all these millions and millions of people who have arrived here since Blair and since the 1960s, right? They're here to stay for all time, right?
Yeah.
And that's the difference. That's why he's taking this position, because he can't even conceive of the future being anything other than.
Well, Toombs is an eternal boomer, isn't he? He's a Chatham House cult historian, a moral coward, I would say. And this argument is it's just nonsense. It's just pure capitulation. I mean, what our ancestors would be spinning in their graves. And as you say, there is that argument where they say, "Oh well, English is just like Anglo and Saxon and Jutes. They're from Germany or wherever." And the original, even if you go back beyond that, the original Britons, they're actually like some sort of corded ware people that actually come from the steppe, the Russian steppe. And those people, anyway, come from the Levant. And we all come from a single black mother in the East African Rift Valley. Anyway, so it's just they must know on some level that what they're trying to argue is crazy. It is crazy, and pure defeatism and suicidal. What he's arguing for there ultimately is a demographic replacement, a complete irreversible demographic replacement. And I think it is morally, I say, called him a moral coward, it is morally disgusting to me that you would capitulate so profoundly.
It feels very much the attitude of the conservatives in like the 50s and 60s, where they basically decided, it's over, the empire's gone, it's after Suez, gun to my head, England's done. So right, managed decline it is, folks. Like, there's literally no way out of this, so we're just going to be the stewards who watch England slip into a lovely warm bath after. That's the same attitude of these people. And then Thatcher came along and completely changed and revitalised, you're basically like, no, we can just do things. We can just turn around. We can just come back. And all those people who were part of that were swept away and a new generation came in. There's absolutely no reason why this can't happen again. It literally is that meme of the up and down sine wave of it's over, we're back, it's over, we're back, it's over, we're back. People feel when times are tough that times will always be tough, but they don't have to be.
No, they don't have to be. It's entirely choice. As he goes on to say here, for centuries, Englishness revolved around institutions. The kingdom, the church, the common law, and the inherited rights of freeborn Englishmen. in quotes. Since the age of Romanticism, many have cherished a rural vision of eternal England, shaped by Wordsworth, Constable, Turner, inspired by Italy, and Elgar, influenced by Wagner. For others, Englishness means their hometown, their football, the fish and chips, pints at the pub. The one thing I just want to say about this particular paragraph is, when he talks about Englishness revolved around the institutions, this is not a chicken and egg situation, right? Of which came first. No, obviously the people created the institutions, right?
Right.
And so therefore, logically, there must have been a people before the institutions, and therefore we should not be defining ourselves by the institutions, because you are English, whether unfortunately, one of the other things he goes on to say in this piece is the fact that, well, we can't forget that, David Cameron, Tony Blair, all these traitors, they're English people. Yeah, they are. Because being English isn't defined by whether you're progressive or reactionary or anything of the sort. It's defined by your birth, but they are English.
You can see Tombs's angle here, the type of person, the type of argument is that you can't mention Turner without the fact that he was inspired by Italian things.
Right.
You can't mention Elgar without mentioning he was inspired by a German, all that sort of thing. Like fish and chips. Oh, there's evidence that people had fish and chips in ancient Jordan or something. Yeah. Therefore, it's just clutching at straws.
Well, it's like, tomatoes are from the Americas. Oh, sorry, Italian cuisine is actually all American now. No, that's not how this works. The other interesting thing, where they talk about the institutions, I think it is true that, historic, especially for the last 1,000 years, sort of Englishness has had a quieter ethnic identity compared to those on the continent, because since the Norman invasion, we haven't really had, any sort of, direct wars outside, people coming in to Britain. Whereas when you're on the continent, you sort of have been, French, German, Italian, Spanish, whatever, because people will be trying to, snuffle you over, and there was more sort of conflict on the continent. Whereas for English, I was like, oh, we've just been here for the last 1,500 years. No, nobody else is here. It's just us. So there was not even a need or an idea to sort of, express this. It was very sort of, everybody sort of knew it, but there was no reason to think of them in the way, in that specific ethnic way.
No, absolutely. And what's more, there's two things on that point, which is just that, one, obviously England, of the nations of the British Isles, has just always had more cultural might, right, to assert itself against the Welsh identity, against the Scottish identity, against the Irish identity. So they've always had a very strong sense of themselves, because we've always had the dominant hand over them. But another point to make as well, when it comes to something like the British Empire, is that, of course, all empires are, by their nature of being, whether it's the British Empire or the Spanish Empire or the Ottoman Empire, right, it's your people on top, and you demand how the rules are set. But the advantage that Britain has always had is the fact that we have been an island. So we could have the empire abroad, but we never really had to, beyond the people who went abroad to administrate it, we never had to live amongst them in Britain. And that's not the same thing as a land empire, like the Ottoman Empire, that constantly had Greeks and Jews and all the different people in Constantinople itself, right, constantly needing to figure out and question its identity. And so we've been very much shielded for that for many, many centuries. And now that all these different people have finally been brought into our island, we're having this whole existential crisis about how do we rediscover ourselves? How do we defend ourselves against this?
It does reveal itself as as just gaslighting nonsense. When you would ask about other places in the world, would Tombs argue that there's no such thing as being an ethnically Japanese person or an ethnically Zulu person or something? I wonder if he would. I wonder if he'd have the temerity to try and argue that. And also, when you look at when you can get your DNA checked out by things like Ancestry.com or Living DNA or something, well, it clearly shows that you are from somewhere and not somewhere else. Right? So most people in our office have done that, Living DNA or Ancestry.com, showing that most of us are nearly entirely from either these islands or at least northwest Europe. And So what is that? What would Tombs reply to something like that?
Yeah.
And you sequence the DNA of Rishi Sunak or Suella Braverman or someone, and it's not from these islands. It's not from Northwest Europe. How would Tombs square that circle?
They just need to know Kipling.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right.
It's just about drinking tea.
Yeah, and I think just sort of, bringing up, for example, like Rishi and Suella there seems to be some sort of, implication in either the conscious or subconscious of Tombs and people who put these arguments forward, is that, if you say, English is an ethnic identity, that must mean you want literally everyone who is not there out of your country immediately right now. But, I don't, want to deport Rishi Sunak or Suella Braverman immediately. There are,
Not immediately. I want to gloat over it first.
No, there's lots of people who can come from other countries, can also be born here and have different ethnic identities, but who can fit in and still exist in this society, while there still is an English identity as well. But it's almost as if that they're panicking that if you do admit this, suddenly there's immediate deportations of literally everybody and ethnic cleansing.
Well, there's no mention of deportations in this entire article.
Yeah, but I mean, that's sort of, I guess, what would be in their head of like, oh, if we do admit this, then it will inevitably, everyone will definitely want this, which is not the case. Of course, there has to be, I think, some deportations and some remigration, but not everybody has to go.
Well, but this is really the question, isn't it? It's not a question of whether anyone should go, right? The question is now just how many, right, need to go.
Yeah.
Right. That is actually where the conversation is at now. And as my good friend here, Laurie Wastel, wrote for The Spectator, demographics is a new dividing line on the right. He wrote this shortly after that actual one-day conference itself, and he just lays out in clear detail as I say, the gulf of difference between people like Tombs and people who are more of our age and who are actually going to live for decades and decades to come, right, with whatever future England holds. And not just for us, but for our children as well. And as Laurie points out here in a poll very kindly given by Hope Not Hate, it's been suggested that the white British people could be a minority in the UK by the 2060s due to current immigration patterns. If this does happen, which one or two of the following words best describes how it will make you feel? Now, as you can tell there, the pleased and happy people are very, very much in the minority. The people who say unhappy, uneasy, disappointed are starkly higher, right? So Tombs can say it doesn't matter. For most people it does. That just is the reality. You feel it innately, right? It's something that most people don't even really articulate. But they feel it. They feel that there is a sense of injustice here, especially as, we constantly bring up, this has always been against a consented public will. Always. And yet, not only is it continued, it's accelerated, right? And so but as I say, is it really inevitable that we're going to just have to live with ghettos and violence in Brixton and the colonisation of Barking and Birmingham and Sheffield and all these places that have just set themselves up in opposition to the English people?
And ultimately a demographic replacement in the end.
Right. Yes.
I would argue the exact opposite. Not only is that
I thought you might.
Not inevitable, I would say that remigration is inevitable.
Yes.
They must go back to the tune of millions.
Well, as Rupert said here just this morning, just ending mass immigration is not good enough. We need to reverse mass immigration, right? Something that we're all on board with at this point. Well, other than Telegraph, writers for the Telegraph, right? But otherwise, this is where the winds are.
Other than Ash Sarkar and Robert Tombs.
Yeah.
Interesting bedfellows.
Yeah.
Well, actually, in the words of Ash Sarkar, yes, lads, we're winning.
We are.
Not yet.
No.
It's in the pipeline,
on the
I
way.
feel.
It's in the winds, because as you said, Bo, many, many years ago, it is inevitable.
Who are the men that pick for scraps amongst the ruins at the end of history? You should know, because you encounter them every day. Between the towering buildings of a fallen empire, we find the Fellaheen, the historyless men, who know nothing of the turning of the cosmic wheel and find themselves outside of civilization itself. Cut loose from the great chain of being, they represent the loam into which our dying culture will return. That is, unless we choose to take up the burden once again. This Fellaheen condition is the subject we explore in issue 4 of Islander magazine, on sale while stocks last and available worldwide at shop.lotusseaters.com.